They found 5 bodies in the canyon at first light, laid out like prayer stones, each one farther from the entrance than the last. The sun was just breaking over the ridge when Sheriff William Garrett saw them. He pulled his horse up short. His breath caught in his throat. No one in town knew who had done it. Not yet. But they would learn soon enough. The bodies were arranged with a kind of terrible precision. The first man lay 20 yards into the pass, the second 50 yards beyond that. The third and fourth were scattered higher up the slope. The fifth rested near a standing stone at the canyon's throat where the walls narrowed to nothing. Sheriff Garrett dismounted slowly. His boots crunched on loose rock. He knelt beside the nearest body and turned it over. A single bullet hole, dead center through the chest. He moved to the next. Same thing. Clean. Final. By the time he reached the fifth body, his hands were shaking. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered. His deputy, a young man named Collins, rode up behind him. Collins went pale when he saw what lay scattered across the canyon floor. "Who could do this?" Collins asked. Garrett didn't answer. He was staring at something in the dust, a spent shell casing, brass heavy longer than his thumb. He picked it up and held it to the light. Buffalo rifle. That changed everything. "Get back to town," Garrett said. "Fast as you can. Tell everyone to stay inside." "Why? What is it?" "Just go." Collins hesitated, then turned his horse and spurred it hard. Dust rose in a cloud behind him as he disappeared down the trail. Garrett stood alone in the canyon. The wind moved through the pass carrying the smell of gunpowder and something older, something that reminded him of the war. He looked up at the ridges on either side. Somewhere up there a shooter had taken position. Somewhere up there they had waited. And then they had fired. Again, and again, and again. 5 shots. 5 bodies. Garrett had seen skilled marksmen before. He had fought alongside sharpshooters in the Union Army. But this was different. The distance alone was impossible. The wind in this canyon shifted every few seconds. The light played tricks on the eyes. No one could shoot like this. No one he knew. He walked back to his horse, his mind racing. As he swung into the saddle, he noticed something else. Tracks. Boot prints leading up the eastern slope. Small, narrow. A woman's boots. He stared at them for a long moment. Then he shook his head. No. Impossible. He rode back toward town, leaving the dead where they lay. The town woke to the news like a man waking to a fever. By mid-morning, every door stood open. Every face turned toward the road. Whispers moved through the streets like wind through dry grass. 5 men dead, shot from impossible distances. No one had heard the shots. No one had seen the shooter. In the saloon, men gathered in tight clusters. They spoke in low voices, glancing toward the windows as if expecting death to ride in at any moment. "It was Pike's gang," someone said. "Had to be. Then who killed them?" Silence. "Maybe they turned on each other," another man offered. 5 clean shots, all from the same rifle, that ain't turning on each other. That's execution. The word hung in the air. Execution. Old Ruth Hawthorne sat in the corner, her hands folded over the top of her walking cane. She said nothing, but her eyes were sharp, watching, listening. Sheriff Garrett pushed through the crowd and stood at the bar. He set the spent shell casing down on the wood. It rolled once, then stopped. "Anyone recognize this?" he asked. The men leaned in. One of them picked it up, turned it over. "Buffalo rifle," he said. "50 caliber, maybe bigger." "Who in this valley shoots a rifle like that?" The men looked at each other. No one answered. Garrett felt frustration rising in his chest. Somebody knows something. 5 men don't die in our canyon without somebody knowing why. "Maybe it wasn't our business to know," Ruth said quietly from the corner. Everyone turned to look at her. "What's that supposed to mean?" Garrett asked. Ruth stood leaning on her cane. "It means Pike's gang has been terrorizing this valley for 2 years. It means we all knew it, and none of us did a damn thing about it." "We couldn't," Garrett said. "They were too many, too well armed. And now they're dead." Ruth's voice was calm, steady. "Maybe the valley took care of itself." "The valley didn't pull that trigger," Garrett said. "A person did. And I need to know who." Ruth looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Garrett called after her. "To check on a friend." She left without another word. Garrett watched her go. Something in the way she moved told him she knew more than she was saying. He grabbed his hat and followed her out into the street. 2 days earlier, the valley had been quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Eleanor Cross stood at her kitchen window watching the sun rise over the hills. Her hands rested on the edge of the sink. The water in the basin was cold. She had been standing there for nearly an hour, though she couldn't remember why. The ranch was small, worn. The fence leaned to the left. The porch sagged in the middle. The barn stood dark and broad-backed against the morning sky, its wood gray from decades of sun and wind. She had lived here for 5 years, alone. The town thought of her as harmless, a widow, a woman who kept to herself, someone to pity perhaps, but not to fear, not to notice. That was how she wanted it. Eleanor turned from the window and crossed the room. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. The liquid was black and bitter. She drank it without sugar. Outside, a horse nickered softly. She glanced toward the barn, then returned to the window. A rider was coming up the road. Eleanor set her cup down. Her hand moved instinctively toward the drawer beside the sink. Then she stopped herself. She took a breath, folded her hands, waited. The rider was Ruth Hawthorne. Eleanor felt the tension leave her shoulders. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch. "Morning, Ruth." "Morning, Eleanor." Ruth dismounted slowly, favoring her left leg. She had broken it years ago. It had never healed quite right. "Coffee?" Eleanor asked. "I won't say no." They sat together on the porch steps. The sun was warm on their faces. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ruth said, "You heard about the strangers in town?" Eleanor's hands tightened around her cup. "No. 5 of them. Rode in yesterday afternoon. Rough-looking men, the kind that don't ask permission." "What do they want?" "Don't know yet. But they were asking questions about the ranches out this way. Yours, specifically." Eleanor said nothing. She stared out at the hills. "You know them?" Ruth asked. "No." Ruth studied her face. "You're lying." Eleanor didn't respond. "Eleanor." Ruth's voice softened. "If you're in danger, you need to tell someone." "I'm not in danger." "Then why are your hands shaking?" Eleanor looked down. Her fingers trembled against the porcelain. She set the cup aside and pressed her palms flat against her knees. "I saw one of them," she said quietly. "Through the window, when they rode past. And I recognized him." Ruth waited. "His name is Pike Madson," Eleanor said. "I haven't seen him in 6 years, but I'd know his face anywhere." "Who is he?" Eleanor stood. She walked to the edge of the porch and looked out across her land. The fence, the barn, the creek beyond. "He's the kind of man who takes what he wants," she said. "And he doesn't leave much behind." Ruth rose slowly, leaning on her cane. She moved to stand beside Eleanor. "There's more to this, isn't there?" Ruth said. Eleanor didn't answer. "I've known you 5 years," Ruth continued. "You don't talk much. You don't ask for help. You keep your head down. But I'm not blind, Eleanor. I see the way you watch the road, the way you check the locks at night. You're not just a widow trying to get by. You're someone hiding." Eleanor closed her eyes. "Who are you, Eleanor Cross?" For a moment, Eleanor considered telling her. All of it. The truth she had buried with her husband, the life she had walked away from, the name that once carried weight across 3 territories. But she didn't. "I'm just a woman trying to live quietly," she said. Ruth sighed. "All right, have it your way." She turned toward her horse. "But if those men come out here, you send for me. You hear? I will." Ruth mounted slowly. She looked down at Eleanor one last time. "You're stronger than you let on," Ruth said. "I hope you remember that." She rode away, leaving Eleanor standing alone on the porch. Eleanor watched her go. Then she turned and went back inside. She walked to the drawer beside the sink, opened it. Inside lay a single key, old and iron. She picked it up, held it in her palm, felt its weight. Not yet, she thought. Not unless I have to. She closed the drawer and returned to the window. That evening, 5 riders came to town. They rode in just before dusk when the light was fading and the streets were emptying. Their horses were lathered with sweat. Their faces were hard. They moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing no one would challenge them. Pike Madson led them. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a scar that ran from his ear to his chin. His eyes were black. His voice was low and rough, like gravel sliding over stone. They tied their horses outside the saloon and went in. The room went quiet. Pike walked to the bar and slapped his hand down on the wood. "Whiskey. The good kind." The bartender poured without a word. Pike drank it in one swallow, then turned to face the room. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Evening, gentlemen," he said. "Name's Pike Madson. These are my associates. We'll be staying in your fine town for a few days, maybe longer. Depends on how things go." No one responded. "Now," Pike continued, "we're looking for a piece of land, a ranch, out east near the creek. Belongs to a widow, I'm told. Any of you know her?" Silence. Pike's smile widened. "Come now. Surely someone knows the woman I'm talking about. Lives alone, keeps to herself, probably doesn't have much in the way of protection." Sheriff Garrett stood slowly from his table. "What do you want with her?" Pike turned to him. "You the law here?" "I am." "Good. Then you can tell me where to find her." "I can, but I won't. Not until you tell me why you're asking." Pike studied him for a moment, then he laughed. It was a cold sound, mirthless. "I like you, Sheriff. You got spine. Not much sense, but spine." He stepped closer. "Here's the truth. That land belongs to me. It was promised to me 6 years ago by a man who owed me a debt. But he died before he could pay. So now I'm collecting." "That's not how the law works," Garrett said. "The law." Pike shook his head. "The law is whatever a man can enforce. And out here, Sheriff, I'm the only enforcement that matters." He turned back to his men. "Let's go. We'll find the place ourselves." They left without paying. The saloon remained silent for a long time after they were gone. Finally someone said, "We should warn her." "No point," another man replied. "What's she going to do? She's just a woman." Garrett stood and walked to the door. He looked out at the darkening street. The riders were already gone, heading east toward the hills, toward Eleanor Cross's ranch. He reached for his gun belt, then stopped. What could he do? 5 men against 1. He was a good shot, but he wasn't a fool. He turned back to the room. "Anyone willing to ride out there with me?" No one moved. Garrett felt shame burn in his chest, but he didn't ride out either. He told himself it was the smart choice, the safe choice, but deep down he knew it was cowardice. The riders came to Eleanor's ranch just after nightfall. They didn't knock. Pike dismounted and walked straight to the barn. He kicked the door open. Inside, 2 horses stamped nervously. A mule brayed in alarm. "Nice stock," Pike said. "Be a shame if something happened to them." One of his men, a young boy barely out of his teens, looked uncomfortable. "Uncle Pike, maybe we should just talk to her first." Pike turned on him. "Finn, you got something to say?" Finn looked down. "No, sir." "Good. Because I don't pay you to think. I pay you to do what I tell you." He pulled a match from his pocket and struck it against the barn wall. The flame flared bright in the darkness. "Let's see if the widow's home," Pike said. He tossed the match into a pile of dry hay. The fire caught instantly. It raced along the straw, crackling and hissing. Within seconds the barn was filled with smoke. The animals screamed. Their terror was sharp and raw. Eleanor was inside the house when she heard it. She ran to the window. Her heart stopped. The barn was burning. She threw the door open and ran toward it, but Pike stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Stay back, woman," he said, "or join them." Eleanor stopped. Her hands were clenched into fists. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. "You got a man to defend this place?" Pike asked. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. "I had one. He died." "Then you got nothing," Pike smiled. "And nothing is what we're leaving you." Eleanor wanted to scream, to fight, to tear him apart with her bare hands. But she didn't. She stood there frozen as the barn burned, as the beams cracked and fell, as everything she had built turned to ash. Pike and his men watched for a few minutes. Then they mounted their horses and rode away, laughing. Eleanor stood alone in the firelight. Her face was streaked with soot. Her hands were bleeding from where she had tried to pull at the fence. She did not cry. Not yet. She waited until the last beam collapsed, until the flames sank to embers, until the only sound was the wind moving through the ruins. Then she turned and walked back to the house. She went straight to the drawer beside the sink, took out the key, and went to find what the fire could not touch. The ruins smoldered through the night. Eleanor stood at the edge of what had been her barn waiting. The heat was still too intense to enter, so she waited. Patient, still. The moon climbed overhead. Silver light spilled across the valley, turning the ash pale as snow. Finally, near midnight, the last embers cooled enough. Eleanor stepped into the wreckage. The smell was thick. Burned wood, scorched hay. Something deeper, older, like the earth itself, had been wounded. She moved carefully, testing each step. The floor had collapsed inward, creating a pit of ash and charred timber. She knelt at the center where the supports had fallen, brushed aside the debris with her bare hands. Her fingers blackened, her palms blistered from the heat still radiating from below. But she kept digging. Beneath the ruin, hidden where fire could not easily reach, lay a low, iron-bound chest. Eleanor gripped the edges and pulled. The chest came free with a groan of protesting metal. She dragged it clear of the ash and set it on solid ground. For a moment she simply looked at it. 5 years. 5 years since she had opened this chest. 5 years since she had even allowed herself to think about what lay inside. She lifted the lid. Moonlight fell across blue steel and oiled wood. The rifle rested there as it always had. Massive. Immaculate. Its barrel was longer than her arm, dark as still water at dawn. The stock was walnut polished smooth by years of handling. The metal gleamed despite the darkness. A buffalo rifle, built for distance and certainty, built for a time when patience mattered more than speed. Eleanor ran her hand along the barrel, not with affection, but with familiarity, like greeting an old companion whose name you never forgot. Her hands remembered the weight before her mind did. She lifted it from the chest, felt the balance settle into her shoulder. Her finger found the trigger guard automatically. Her eye aligned with the sight. Muscle memory, even after 5 years. She lowered the rifle and looked at it in the moonlight. There were no scratches, no rust. She had maintained it even when she swore never to use it again. Some habits she had learned were carved too deep to abandon. Beneath the rifle lay a leather pouch. She opened it. Bullets. Heavy brass casings, each one the length of her finger. She counted them. 30 rounds. More than enough. More than she would need. Eleanor closed the chest and carried it toward the house. The rifle she held separately cradled against her chest like something sacred, or something damned. Inside she lit a lamp and spread an oilcloth across the kitchen table. She laid the rifle down carefully. Then she began the ritual she had performed 1,000 times before. Disassembly, inspection, cleaning. Her hands moved without thought, releasing the bolt, removing the barrel, checking each component for wear or damage. She found none. The rifle was perfect. It had always been perfect. She cleaned it anyway, drew an oiled cloth along the barrel's length, worked the action until it moved like water, tested the trigger pull, smooth, crisp, breaking at exactly the pressure she remembered. As she worked, memories came unbidden. 12 years earlier, a different place, a different Eleanor. She stood on a ridgeline in Montana Territory, the rifle already familiar in her hands. Below, a herd of buffalo moved across the plain like a dark river. The wind was strong that day, gusting, unpredictable. The Army scout beside her shook his head. "Can't be done, not in this wind." Eleanor said nothing. She watched the herd, watched the wind, felt the way it pushed against her face, then shifted, pushed again, shifted. There was a rhythm to it. You just had to listen. She waited for the lull, that brief moment between gusts when the air went still. When it came, she fired. The sound rolled across the valley like thunder. The buffalo at the edge of the herd stumbled and fell. 800 yards. The scout stared at her. "How in God's name did you make that shot?" "I didn't," Eleanor said quietly. "The wind did. I just waited for it to tell me when." After that, the Army called her whenever they needed someone who understood distance, who understood patience. They called her the best they had ever seen. They were right. Eleanor blinked. The memory faded. She was back in her kitchen, alone, the rifle gleaming on the table before her. She picked up the bolt and slid it back into place, locked it down. The sound was solid, final. She loaded a single bullet into the chamber, felt the weight change. The rifle was no longer just steel and wood. It was potential. It was consequence. Eleanor set it aside and went to the window. Dawn was still hours away, but she could feel it coming. The way the darkness began to thin at the edges, the way the air changed temperature. She thought about Pike Madson, about the way he had smiled as her barn burned, about the laughter of his men as they rode away. She thought about Thomas, about the promise she had made to him. No more killing. She closed her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but they left me no choice." The sun rose slowly, painting the valley in shades of copper and gold. Eleanor did not sleep. She spent the hours before dawn gathering what she needed. Water, a small amount of food, a knife, a length of rope. Nothing else. Excess was a burden. She dressed in dark clothes, trousers instead of a skirt, a heavy coat despite the growing warmth. She braided her hair tight against her head and covered it with a wide-brimmed hat. When she looked at herself in the cracked mirror above the wash basin, she barely recognized the woman staring back. This was not Eleanor Cross, the quiet widow. This was someone older, someone she had tried to bury. She turned away from the mirror and picked up the rifle. Outside, the morning was clear and still. Eleanor circled the remains of the barn, reading the ground the way she always had. The outlaws had not bothered to hide their tracks. They never did. Fear had made them lazy. 5 horses, heavy shod poorly. One animal favored its left rear leg. The prints were shallow and uneven. The trail led east toward the canyon pass where the land narrowed and the rock walls rose like clenched fists. Eleanor followed. She moved slowly, carefully, stopping every few hundred yards to check the tracks, to feel the wind, to test the light. The canyon was 3 miles from her ranch. It would take the riders less than an hour to reach it if they rode hard, but they would not ride hard. Men like Pike never hurried. They believed they owned the land they crossed. That belief would kill them. Eleanor reached the mouth of the canyon by mid-morning. She stopped and studied the terrain. The pass was narrow, maybe 50 feet wide at the entrance, narrowing to 20 at its throat. The walls rose steep on both sides, jagged stone climbing toward the sky. Sound would echo here. A gunshot would bounce and roll, making it impossible to determine direction. Perfect. Eleanor climbed the eastern slope. The ascent was difficult. The rock was loose and sharp, but she had climbed worse. Halfway up, she found what she was looking for. A narrow ledge no more than 3 feet wide overlooking the entire pass. From here she could see everything. The entrance, the throat, the far bend where the canyon opened into the valley beyond. She tested the position, lay flat on her stomach, brought the rifle up. The angle was good. The distance to the center of the pass was perhaps 400 yards, well within her range. She lowered the rifle and sat up, pulled a canteen from her pack and took a small sip. Then she settled in to wait. While Eleanor prepared, the town stirred with uneasy questions. Sheriff Garrett stood in his office staring at the wanted poster he had found in the ashes of Eleanor's barn. Most of it was burned. Only fragments remained, but he could still read the name. Elia, Cross, Army Scout, Reward. He had thought it was a mistake at first, a coincidence. But the more he looked at it, the more certain he became. Eleanor Cross was not just a widow. She was someone the Army had once paid to track and kill. He grabbed his hat and walked to Ruth Hawthorne's house. She answered the door before he could knock. "You found it," she said simply. "You knew." "Of course I knew." Ruth stepped aside to let him in. "I've known since the day she arrived." Garrett followed her into the small parlor. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because she asked me not to." Ruth sat in her chair by the window. "She came here to disappear Sheriff, to be someone else. I respected that. She's a killer. She was a hunter. There's a difference." "Is there?" Ruth looked at him steadily. "Yes, hunters kill because it's necessary. Killers do it because they enjoy it. Eleanor never enjoyed it. That's why she stopped." Garrett sat down heavily. "What happened to her?" Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Love. That's what happened. She met a man who saw past the blood on her hands, a schoolteacher from Boston, Thomas Cross. He was gentle, kind, everything she wasn't. And he made her believe she could be something different. So she walked away, from the Army, from the bounties, from all of it. They came here together, built a life. She buried her rifle and swore never to touch it again. But Thomas died. 3 years ago. Consumption. It took him slow." Ruth's voice softened. "He made her promise at the end. No more killing, no matter what. She gave him her word." Garrett thought about the bodies in the canyon. "She broke that promise. Wouldn't you?" Ruth met his eyes. "They burned her home, killed her animals, laughed while they did it. What was she supposed to do? Ask them nicely to leave?" Garrett had no answer. "She's out there right now, isn't she?" he said finally. "Hunting them." "I imagine so. I should stop her." "You can't, even if you wanted to." Ruth stood and walked to the window. "Eleanor Cross is the best tracker I've ever known, the best shot. If she's decided those men need to die, they're already dead. They just don't know it yet." Garrett stood as well. "What am I supposed to do?" "Nothing. Let the valley take care of itself." Ruth turned to face him. "But when it's over, you might consider helping her rebuild. That barn meant something to her. It was the first thing Thomas built when they arrived." Garrett nodded slowly. He walked to the door, then paused. "Ruth, is she going to come back from this?" Ruth was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," she said finally. "I hope so." Eleanor waited through the long afternoon. The sun climbed. The heat built. The stone beneath her grew warm, then hot. She did not move. This was the part most people could not understand. The waiting. They thought shooting was about the trigger pull, about the eye and the hand. But it wasn't. It was about the hours before, the stillness, the patience to let the world move around you while you remained fixed, unmoved, certain. Eleanor had always been good at waiting. As the sun began its descent, memories came again. 8 years earlier, the ranch newly built, Thomas standing in the doorway wiping sawdust from his hands. "Come see," he called to her. Eleanor set down the water bucket and walked to the house. Inside, Thomas had built a table, simple, sturdy, big enough for a family. "It's beautiful," she said. Thomas smiled. "I was thinking, maybe one day there will be more than just us to sit at it." Eleanor's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. She had not told him yet, about the baby, about the life growing inside her. She had been afraid that violence had ruined her for motherhood, that she could not create life after taking so much of it. But standing there looking at the table Thomas had built with his gentle hands, she felt hope. "Maybe," she said softly. Thomas took her hand. "Eleanor, You're not that person anymore. You don't have to be. How do you know? Because I know you. And the woman I know is kind. She's strong. She's capable of great love. He squeezed her hand. The past doesn't define you. The choice you make right now does. Eleanor wanted to believe him. She tried so hard to believe him. The memory shifted. 6 months later. The creek. The water running fast from spring melt. Eleanor screaming. Blood in the water. The baby born too early. Too small. A boy who never drew breath. Thomas holding her as she wept. His own tears falling silent into her hair. "It's not your fault," he whispered. But Eleanor knew better. She knew what she was. What she had been. The universe had a way of balancing scales. She had taken life. Now life was taken from her. Eleanor blinked hard, forced the memory away. The sun was lower now. The shadows in the canyon were lengthening. She checked the rifle again, adjusted her position slightly, waited. 2 years after losing the boy, Sarah was born. Healthy, perfect. A miracle Eleanor did not deserve but accepted with trembling gratitude. For 7 years Sarah filled the house with laughter, with questions, with joy that Eleanor had forgotten existed, and then the creek took her too. 3 years ago, summer, the water low and lazy, Sarah playing at the edge, Eleanor inside making bread. The scream that came was not Sarah's, it was Eleanor's, when she found her daughter floating, face down, still. The current had been stronger than it looked. Sarah had slipped, hit her head on a rock, drowned in 2 feet of water while Eleanor kneaded dough 50 yards away. Thomas found them both at the water's edge, Eleanor holding Sarah's body, rocking, keening. He buried their daughter beneath the cottonwood tree, carved her name into a wooden cross. 6 months later, the consumption took him too. Before he died, Thomas made Eleanor promise. "No more killing. Please. I don't want you to become that person again." Sarah wouldn't want that either. Eleanor promised. She meant it. But some promises she was learning were made to be broken. The sun touched the western hills. Eleanor heard them before she saw them. Hoofbeats, rough laughter, the careless sound of men who believed they owned the night. She pressed herself flat against the stone and watched. 5 riders entered the canyon. Pike led them sitting tall in his saddle. Behind him came Finn, the young one looking uncertain. Then the others, the drunk already swaying, the tracker alert and careful, and Cutter, the one who had thrown the torch. They rode into the pass without hesitation, without fear. Eleanor's finger found the trigger. Not yet. She watched them come, counted their breathing, measured their pace. They were laughing about something. About her, probably. About the barn. About how easy it had been. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Wait. The first rider crossed the invisible line she had drawn in her mind, the point where angle, distance, and wind aligned. Eleanor inhaled slowly, let half the breath out, held the rest. The world narrowed to the circle of her sight, to the gentle pressure of her finger against cold steel. She thought of Thomas, of his gentle hands, of his belief that she could be something other than what she was. She thought of Sarah, of laughter that would never come again. She thought of the barn burning, of animals screaming, of men who took what they wanted and left ash behind. The trigger broke clean. The rifle roared. The sound rolled through the canyon like the voice of God. The drunk fell first. One moment he was laughing, swaying in his saddle, making some joke about the widow woman probably hiding under her bed. The next moment he was gone. The bullet took him clean through the chest. He toppled backward off his horse without a sound, hit the ground hard, did not move again. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The other riders sat frozen, confused. Their minds could not process what their eyes had just seen. Then the echo came. The gunshot rolled through the canyon like thunder, bouncing off stone walls, repeating, overlapping, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The horses screamed. "Down!" Pike shouted. "Get down!" But there was nowhere to go. The canyon walls rose steep on both sides. The pass ahead was narrow. Behind them was open ground. They were trapped in a killing box, and they had ridden into it willingly. Finn's horse reared. He fought to control it, his face pale with terror. Where did that come from? I don't know. Pike's eyes swept the ridges. Spread out. Find cover. The tracker was already moving. He dismounted in one smooth motion and pressed himself against the canyon wall. His eyes scanned the heights, searching, calculating. There, he said quietly, pointing to the eastern ridge. 7 o'clock, halfway up. Pike followed his gaze, saw nothing but rock and shadow. You sure? I'm sure. The tracker's voice was calm, certain. Whoever it is, they know what they're doing. That's a 400-yard shot, in this wind. Pike's jaw tightened. It's just one person. We're 5. Rush them. 4, the tracker corrected, glancing at the body of the drunk. Then rush them with 4. Uncle Pike, Finn started. Shut up. Pike drew his revolver. On my count. We ride hard for the far end of the canyon. Don't stop. Don't look back. Ready. The men nodded. Even Cutter, who usually smiled at violence, looked nervous. 3, Pike said. 2. Eleanor fired again. Her hands were shaking. She had not expected that. The first shot had been clean. Muscle memory. The body remembering what the mind had tried to forget. But now, with the echo still ringing in her ears, with the knowledge of what she had just done settling into her chest, her hands would not stay still. She aimed at Cutter, the one who had thrown the torch, the one who had laughed loudest. She wanted him dead most of all. But when she squeezed the trigger, her hands betrayed her. The shot went wide by 3 feet. The bullet cracked against stone behind the outlaws. Sparks flew. Rock dust exploded into the air. Eleanor's breath caught. She had missed. After 12 years, after 1,000 perfect shots, she had missed. Thomas's voice came to her unbidden. You're not that person anymore. I have to be, she whispered. Just for today. She worked the bolt. The spent casing ejected, spinning through the air. She chambered another round, forced her breathing to slow, forced her hands to steady. Patience is the bullet you never waste. Thomas had taught her that, back when her hands were sure, when killing was just another task to complete. She aimed again. This time, when she fired, her hands did not shake. Cutter screamed. The bullet took him low through the stomach. Not a clean kill, not a merciful one. He fell from his horse and hit the ground hard, rolled, clutched at his belly, blood poured between his fingers. "Help me!" he shrieked. "God help me!" No one moved to help him. Pike and the others had scattered, some pressed against the canyon wall, others crouched behind rocks that offered no real protection. Finn was closest to Cutter. He crawled forward, reaching out. "Don't," the tracker shouted. "Stay down." But Finn did not listen. He grabbed Cutter's arm and tried to drag him toward cover. Eleanor watched through her sight, saw the young one trying to save his companion, saw the fear and determination on his face. She could take the shot, end him now. Her finger rested on the trigger, but she did not pull it. Something in the boy's face reminded her of the son she had lost, the child who never drew breath, who would have been about this age now if he had lived. She lowered the rifle slightly. Let them have this moment. Finn dragged Cutter behind a boulder. Cutter was still screaming. The sound echoed through the canyon, high and desperate. "Where is she?" Pike shouted. "Can you see her?" The tracker was already climbing, moving fast up the eastern slope, using the rocks for cover. He moved like water, silent, efficient. Eleanor saw him coming. She shifted position, brought the rifle around. But the tracker was good, better than she had expected. He zigzagged, used dead ground, kept large rocks between himself and her position. She fired once, missed. The bullet sparked off stone inches from his head. The tracker did not slow, did not flinch. He kept climbing. Eleanor worked the bolt, fired again. This time the bullet found flesh. The tracker grunted and stumbled. Blood appeared on his left shoulder, but he did not stop. Eleanor's eyes widened. She had seen men keep moving after being shot before, but not like this, not with this kind of determination. This one was dangerous. She ejected the spent casing and reached for another bullet. Her fingers fumbled, dropped it. The brass cartridge rolled across the stone ledge, disappeared over the edge. Eleanor cursed under her breath, grabbed another round from her pouch, loaded it. By the time she looked up, the tracker was gone. She scanned the slope. Nothing. He had found cover, and now he was somewhere below her, hidden among the rocks, hunting her the way she was hunting them. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. This was different. This was not a distant target. This was a man who knew how to move, how to track, how to kill up close. She had to relocate. Eleanor grabbed the rifle and crawled backward off the ledge, found a new position 20 yards south, lower down, better cover but worse sight lines. She settled in and waited. Below, Pike was shouting orders. "Finn, how's Cutter? Dying." Finn's voice cracked. "He needs a doctor. He's not getting one. Leave him. I can't just—" "You can and you will." Pike's face was hard. "That shooter is still up there, and if we don't find them fast, we're all going to end up like Cutter." Cutter's screams had faded to whimpers. He lay on his back staring at the sky, clutching his stomach. Blood pooled beneath him. Finn looked down at him, then at Pike. "This isn't right," Finn said quietly. "Nothing about this is right," Pike snapped. "But it's what we got. Now pick up your gun and help me find whoever is doing this." Finn picked up his revolver. His hands shook. Pike noticed. "You ever killed a man before, boy?" "No, sir." "Well, today might be your day." The tracker moved through the rocks like a ghost. His shoulder burned where the bullet had grazed him. But the wound was shallow, painful, but not crippling. He had been hurt worse. He climbed steadily, quietly, reading the stone, looking for disturbed dust, for scrape marks, for any sign of where the shooter had been. There, a boot print in soft dirt, small, narrow, a woman's boot. The tracker smiled grimly. He had suspected as much. No man in this valley could shoot like that. But he knew of one woman who could. Eleanor Cross. He had heard the stories, back when he rode with different men, before Pike. There had been talk of an army scout who could drop a target at impossible distances, who never missed, who moved through the wilderness like she was born to it. The army had called her the best they had ever seen. Then she had disappeared. Everyone assumed she was dead. The tracker had always wondered. Now he knew. He continued climbing, following the tracks, getting closer. When he reached the ledge where she had been, he found 3 spent casings, still warm. He picked one up, examined it. .50 caliber, buffalo rifle. He looked out across the canyon. From here, the shot to where the drunk had fallen was at least 400 yards, in shifting wind, with the sun in her eyes. And she had made it look easy. The tracker felt something he rarely felt. Respect. He set the casing down and kept moving. Eleanor saw him before he saw her. He came around a boulder 30 feet below her position, moving carefully. His rifle held ready. She had the shot, clean, easy. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was the way he moved, with respect for the land, with awareness. Maybe it was the fact that he had not run when the shooting started, had not panicked, had done exactly what she would have done in his place. He was a professional, like she had been. That made him dangerous. But it also made him worthy of something more than a bullet in the back. Eleanor stood. The tracker saw the movement and spun, brought his rifle up, but Eleanor was faster. She had already drawn her knife. "Drop it," she said. The tracker stared at her. His eyes widened slightly. "Eleanor Cross," he said. "I'll be damned." "You will be if you don't drop that rifle." He lowered it slowly, set it on the ground, straightened. "I tracked you once," he said. 5 years ago. Army contract. They wanted to know if you were still alive. I followed your trail all the way to this valley. And I told them I lost you in the mountains, that you were probably dead." He smiled faintly. "I lied." "Why?" "Because I knew what they wanted you for. More killing, more blood." He gestured at the canyon below. You'd walked away. I respected that. Eleanor kept the knife steady. And now you're back to it. So maybe I was wrong to let you go. They burned my home. I know. I was there. Eleanor's eyes hardened. Then you knew what was going to happen. I did. And you did nothing to stop it. The tracker was quiet for a moment. No, I didn't. That's on me. Yes, it is. She moved forward. Fast. The tracker was ready. He sidestepped her knife thrust and grabbed her wrist. Twisted. Eleanor dropped the knife but used the momentum to drive her elbow into his wounded shoulder. He grunted. His grip loosened. She broke free, kicked at his knee. He blocked it, countered with a punch that caught her in the ribs. Air exploded from her lungs. She stumbled back. They circled each other on the narrow ledge, both breathing hard. You're good, the tracker said, but you're older than you used to be, slower. So are you. True enough. He lunged. She dodged, barely. They grappled. Eleanor was smaller, weaker in raw strength, but she was fast. She hooked his leg, drove him toward the edge. The tracker's boot slipped on loose stone. He teetered. Eleanor shoved hard. He fell backward, grabbed her coat as he went. They both went over. The drop was only 6 feet, but it was onto sharp rock. Eleanor landed hard on her back. The impact drove the breath from her lungs. Pain exploded through her spine. The tracker landed beside her, rolled, came up with a knife in his hand. Eleanor's rifle was 10 feet away. Too far. Her own knife was gone, lost in the fall. She scrambled backward. Her hand found a rock the size of her fist. The tracker advanced. I'm sorry it has to be this way. So am I. He lunged. Eleanor threw the rock. It caught him in the face. His nose crunched. Blood sprayed. He staggered. Eleanor dove for her rifle. Her fingers closed around the barrel. The tracker recovered. Rushed her. Eleanor swung the rifle like a club. The stock connected with the side of his head. The sound was like an axe hitting wood. The tracker dropped to his knees. His knife fell from his hand. He swayed. Eleanor stood over him, breathing hard, bleeding from a dozen scrapes and bruises. The tracker looked up at her. Blood ran from his nose, from the gash in his temple. You were always better than me, he said quietly. I tracked you for 3 months and never got close. You're the best I've ever seen. Eleanor raised the rifle, aimed it at his chest. I know, she said. She fired. The tracker fell backward, his eyes open, staring at the sky he would never see again. Eleanor stood for a long moment, looking down at him. Then she turned and began the descent back to her original position. Below, Pike heard the shot. Close, maybe 100 yards up the slope. That's it, he said to Finn. The tracker got her. But Finn was staring upward, his face pale. Uncle Pike, look. Pike followed his gaze. A figure was moving on the ridge, silhouetted against the sky. Not the tracker. The figure was too small, too slight. Pike's blood went cold. It's her, he whispered. She killed him. She killed the tracker. Finn's revolver shook in his hand. What do we do? Pike looked around. Cutter was dead. His screams had finally stopped. The drunk was dead. The tracker was dead. 3 men gone, and whoever this woman was, she was still up there, still hunting. We run, Pike said. Now. He grabbed Finn's arm and pulled him toward the horses, but Eleanor was already in position. She watched them through her sight, saw Pike dragging the boy toward the animals. She could take Pike now, end it. But the boy, the young one, Finn, he stumbled as they ran, fell. His uncle did not stop to help him. Finn scrambled to his feet, looked back toward where Cutter's body lay. Eleanor saw the expression on his face. Grief, horror, regret. He was not like the others. She shifted her aim, tracked Pike, her finger tightened on the trigger. But Finn ran into her line of fire, blocking the shot. Eleanor lowered the rifle, waited for a clear angle. Pike reached his horse, mounted, spurred it hard. Finn was still on foot, running, trying to catch up. Uncle Pike, wait. Pike did not wait. He rode hard for the mouth of the canyon, not looking back. Finn stopped running, stood in the middle of the pass, watching his uncle abandon him. Eleanor could see his shoulders shaking, could see him slowly sink to his knees. She lined up the shot. Center mass. Easy. Her finger rested on the trigger, but she did not pull it. Something Thomas had said came back to her. The choice you make right now defines you. This boy was young, scared. He had followed Pike because he had no one else, no other family, no other path. But he was not a killer. Not yet. Eleanor lowered the rifle. "Run," she said quietly, though she knew he could not hear her. "Run, and don't come back." As if he had heard, Finn stood. He looked around, at the bodies, at the blood, at the canyon that had become a tomb. Then he ran, not toward Pike, toward the far end of the canyon, away from everything. Eleanor watched him go, let him disappear around the bend. Then she turned her attention to Pike. Pike rode hard for a quarter-mile before he realized no one was following. He pulled his horse to a stop, looked back. The canyon entrance was empty, silent. His breath came in ragged gasps. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool air. They were all dead, everyone but him, and Finn. Where was Finn? Pike considered riding back, looking for the boy. Then he decided against it. Finn was probably dead too, or would be soon. Better to save himself. Pike turned his horse and started forward again. He made it another 100 yards before the shot came. It did not hit him. It hit the ground 3 feet in front of his horse. The animal reared. Pike fought to stay in the saddle. Another shot, this one closer, kicking up dust inches from the horse's hooves. The animal panicked, bucked. Pike lost his grip. He hit the ground hard. The horse bolted, disappearing into the distance. Pike lay on his back, gasping. His ribs ached. His head spun. He heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. He rolled over, reached for his revolver. It was gone, lost in the fall. The footsteps came closer. Pike pushed himself to his knees, looked up. A woman stood 10 feet away. She held a buffalo rifle. The barrel was pointed at his chest. She was not young, maybe 40. Her hair was dark, streaked with gray. Her face was hard, weathered, but her eyes, Pike knew those eyes. "You," he breathed. Eleanor said nothing. "You're the widow, from the ranch." "I am." "You did all this?" Pike gestured at the canyon behind them. 5 men. 4. I let the boy go." Pike's mind raced, trying to understand. "How you're just a woman." "I'm Eleanor Cross." The name hit him like a fist. He had heard it before, years ago, when he rode with different men, before he formed his own gang. They had spoken of Eleanor Cross in whispers, in tones of fear and respect, the Army scout who never missed, who could track a man across bare rock, who killed from distances others considered impossible. She had been a legend. Everyone thought she was dead. Pike stared at her, seeing her now, really seeing her. "You disappeared," he said. "I tried to. Why come back?" "You burned my home." Pike laughed. It was a bitter sound. "That's it. That's what brought you back. A barn. It was more than a barn. It was wood and nails. I've burned 100 like it." Eleanor's eyes hardened. "That barn was built by my husband, with his own hands. It was the first thing he made when we came here, before the house, before anything else, because he knew the animals needed shelter more than we did." Her voice remained steady, calm, but there was something underneath it, something cold and final. "He was a good man," she continued, "the kind who helps strangers, who gives food to people who are hungry, who believes everyone deserves a second chance." Pike's brow furrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." 6 years ago, winter, you were in Montana territory, starving. Your gang had been scattered by the Army. You were alone, dying." Pike's eyes widened. A memory surfaced. Snow, deep and endless. Pike stumbling through it, frost on his beard, his fingers black with frostbite. A cabin, light in the window. He had knocked, begged for food. A man answered, young, soft-spoken. He wore spectacles and had gentle hands. "Please," Pike had said, "I'm dying." The man had looked at him, seen the gun at his hip, the hard lines of violence in his face, but he had opened the door anyway. "Come in," the man said. "Get warm." Pike had stayed 3 days. The man fed him, gave him dry clothes, asked for nothing in return. On the 3rd day Pike had left, without a word of thanks, without looking back. He had stolen food from the man's stores on his way out, and a wool blanket, because that was who Pike was. Pike stared at Eleanor. "That was your husband?" "Yes." "He saved my life?" "Yes." "And I—" Pike trailed off. "And you burned everything he built." Eleanor's voice was quiet. "You destroyed the home we made together, the life he gave me when I thought I was beyond saving." Pike's throat tightened. For the first time in years he felt something that might have been shame. "I didn't know," he said. "Would it have mattered if you did?" Pike opened his mouth, closed it. The truth was, it would not have mattered. He took what he wanted. He always had. The fact that Thomas had once shown him kindness meant nothing. Kindness was weakness. Thomas had been weak, and weak men died poor and forgotten. Pike straightened, met Eleanor's eyes. "So what now?" he asked. "You going to kill me?" "Yes." "Because I burned your barn?" "No." Eleanor's voice was steady. "Because you are everything my husband was not. He believed in second chances, in redemption, in the goodness of people." She paused. "He was wrong, and you proved it. So yes, I'm going to kill you, not for revenge, but because the world is better without men like you in it." Pike's hand inched toward a knife at his belt. Eleanor saw the movement. "Don't." He drew anyway. Eleanor fired. The bullet took him through the right shoulder. His knife fell from his hand. He screamed and clutched at the wound. Eleanor worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, chambered another round. "You could have let me go," Pike gasped. "I would have left, never come back." "Men like you always come back." "You don't know that." "I do, because I used to hunt men like you, and every single one said the same thing when I caught them. 'Let me go and I'll change.' They never did." Pike slumped against the ground. Blood seeped through his fingers. "My husband believed people could change," Eleanor said. "He believed it until the day he died. He saved you because of that belief." She raised the rifle. "But I don't believe it, and I'm done pretending I do." Pike looked up at her, his face pale. "You're just a killer, same as me." "No," Eleanor said quietly. "You kill because you enjoy it. I kill because it's necessary. There's a difference." "Is there?" Eleanor thought about that, about Thomas, about the promise she had made, about everything she had tried to be for 5 years. "Yes," she said finally. "There is." She pulled the trigger. The shot echoed across the valley, then faded, leaving only silence behind. Eleanor stood over Pike's body for a long moment. She felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, no relief, just emptiness. She had broken her promise to Thomas. She had become the person he had feared she would become. But she had also stopped 5 men who would have hurt others, who would have burned other homes, destroyed other lives. Was that justice? Or was it just more killing? Eleanor did not know. She lowered the rifle, looked out across the valley. The sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red. It was beautiful. Thomas would have loved this light. Eleanor turned and began the walk back to her ranch. Behind her the canyon held its dead, and the valley remembered everything. Eleanor walked through the gathering dusk. The rifle rested across her shoulders. Her boots raised small clouds of dust with each step. The canyon fell away behind her, and with it the bodies of 5 men who would never see another sunrise. She did not look back. The walk to her ranch took 2 hours. The sun sank below the horizon. Stars emerged one by one, scattered across the sky like seeds thrown by an unseen hand. The moon rose full and pale, painting the valley silver. Eleanor's body ached. The fight with the tracker had left bruises across her ribs. Her hands were scraped raw. Her shoulder throbbed where she had hit the ground. But she kept walking. When she finally reached her property, she stopped at the gate. What remained of it? The barn was a black skeleton against the night sky. Charred beams jutted upward like broken fingers. Ash covered everything soft and gray in the moonlight. Eleanor stood there for a long time looking at the ruins. This was what remained of Thomas's work, of the first thing he had built with his gentle hands. Gone. She walked past the barn to the house, climbed the porch steps. The boards creaked under her weight. She opened the door and stepped inside. The house was dark, cold, empty. Eleanor set the rifle on the kitchen table, lit a lamp. The warm glow pushed back the shadows but could not touch the emptiness that filled the rooms. She went to the wash basin and cleaned her hands. The water turned red, then brown, then clear. She dried them on a cloth and looked at herself in the cracked mirror. The woman staring back was not the person she had been 2 days ago. That woman had been hiding, pretending, trying to be something she was not. This woman was older, harder, more honest. Eleanor turned away from the mirror. She walked to the bedroom and opened the wardrobe. Inside, hanging in the back, was a dress. Simple, gray. The one she wore to town when she needed to be invisible. She took it out, held it for a moment, then she folded it carefully and set it aside. She would not need it anymore. From the bottom of the wardrobe she pulled out clothes she had not worn in years. Canvas trousers, a leather vest, a coat with reinforced shoulders for carrying weight. The clothes of Eleanor Cross, the hunter, the scout. She changed slowly. The fabric felt strange against her skin, familiar and foreign at the same time. When she was dressed, she looked at herself again. This was who she was, who she had always been. Thomas had tried to change that, had believed she could be something different, and for a while she had believed it too, but some things she was learning were carved too deep to erase. Eleanor returned to the kitchen, sat down at the table. The rifle lay before her, dark and silent. She ran her hand along the barrel one more time. Then she began to disassemble it. Sheriff Garrett found her just after dawn. He rode up slowly, his hand near his gun, but not on it. He dismounted at the gate and walked toward the house. Eleanor was sitting on the porch. The rifle lay across her lap, broken down into its component parts. She was cleaning the barrel with an oiled cloth. She looked up as he approached, said nothing. Garrett stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Morning, Mrs. Cross." "Sheriff? You mind if I sit?" Eleanor gestured to the step beside her. Garrett sat down carefully, keeping space between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Garrett said, "I found 5 bodies in the canyon this morning." "I know." "You want to tell me what happened?" Eleanor continued, cleaning the barrel. "They came to my ranch 2 nights ago, burned my barn, killed my animals, threatened me." "And you followed them?" "Yes." "And you killed them?" Eleanor set down the cloth, looked at him directly. "Yes." Garrett nodded slowly. "I also found this." He pulled a wanted poster from his coat. It was burned at the edges, but the name was still visible. Eleanor Cross, Army Scout, wanted for questioning in connection with the deaths of 17 men. "That poster is 12 years old," Eleanor said. "Those men were deserters, Confederate raiders. They were burning farms in Kansas. The Army paid me to stop them." "Did you?" "Yes." Garrett folded the poster and put it away. "The Army listed you as dead 5 years ago." "I asked them to." "Why?" Eleanor picked up the rifle barrel again, resumed cleaning. "Because I was tired. Tired of killing. Tired of being the person people called when they needed someone dead. I wanted to be something else." "So you came here, married Thomas Cross, tried to disappear." "Yes." "Did it work?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "For a while. Thomas made me believe I could be different, could be better. He saw something in me I didn't see in myself." And when he died, I made him a promise. No more killing, no matter what. She looked at Garrett. I broke that promise. Garrett leaned back against the porch post. Those men you killed, Pike Madson's gang, they've been terrorizing this valley for 2 years, burning ranches, stealing livestock, hurting people. We all knew it, and none of us did anything about it. You were afraid. We were cowards. Garrett's voice was bitter. We told ourselves there was nothing we could do, that they were too many, too dangerous. But the truth is, we were just scared, and we let good people suffer because of it. Eleanor said nothing. What you did, Garrett continued, some would call it murder, others would call it justice. He paused. What do you call it? Eleanor set down the barrel, picked up the stock, examined it in the morning light. I call it necessary, she said. Nothing more, nothing less. Garrett nodded. He stood slowly. I should arrest you, take you to trial. Eleanor's hand moved toward the knife at her belt. Not fast, not threatening, just ready. Garrett saw the movement, smiled faintly. But I'm not going to. Eleanor's hand stopped. Because if I did, Garrett said, I'd have to explain to a jury why 5 armed men died and you're still standing. I'd have to explain how you made shots that most men would consider impossible. I'd have to tell them who you really are. He walked to the edge of the porch, looked out at the burned barn. And if I did that, he continued, word would spread. People would know Eleanor Cross is still alive, still capable, and then others would come, looking for you, looking to test themselves against the legend. He turned back to her. Thomas wanted you to have peace. I'm going to help him give it to you. Eleanor studied his face. What are you going to tell people? The truth, that Pike's gang rode into the canyon and never came out, that someone stopped them. But I don't know who. He met her eyes. As far as I'm concerned, Eleanor Cross died 5 years ago. What I see here is just a widow defending her home. Eleanor felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Thank you. Garrett tipped his hat. Don't thank me yet. The town is going to have questions, and some of them are going to want answers. Let them ask. They'll want to know if it was you. Tell them the truth, that you don't know for certain. Garrett smiled. I can do that. He started toward his horse, then paused. One more thing. Ruth sent me to tell you something. What? That you're not alone, that when you're ready there are people who want to help rebuild. Eleanor looked at the ruins of her barn, at the ash covering her land. Tell her I appreciate it, but I don't need help. She said you'd say that. Garrett mounted his horse. She also said to tell you that accepting help isn't weakness, it's trust, and trust is what makes a community. He rode away, leaving Eleanor alone on the porch. She sat for a while longer, watching the sun climb higher, thinking about what he had said. Finally she stood, gathered the rifle parts, went inside. By midday the town was buzzing with news. Pike's gang was dead, all 5 of them, shot in the canyon. No one knew who had done it. The sheriff wasn't saying. But rumors spread like wildfire. Some said it was a drifter, a gunfighter passing through. Others claimed it was divine justice, that the valley itself had risen up against the outlaws. A few whispered a different story, that the quiet widow from the eastern ranch had done it, but that seemed impossible. She was just a woman, alone, unarmed. Wasn't she? In the saloon men argued about what had happened, about who could make shots like that, about whether the rumors of Eleanor Cross could possibly be true. Ruth Hawthorne sat in her usual corner saying nothing, just listening. When the talk grew too loud, too certain, she finally spoke. You want to know who killed those men, she said. The room went quiet. Then ride out to the canyon. Look at where the bodies fell. Look at the distance from the shooter's position. Look at the wind marks on the stone. Look at the evidence. And then what? Someone asked. And then decide if it matters. Ruth stood slowly leaning on her cane. Pike's gang terrorized this valley for 2 years. They burned homes. They hurt people. And none of you did anything to stop them. The men shifted uncomfortably. So whether it was a drifter or divine justice or that widow you all pity so much, the result is the same. The valley is safer now than it was 3 days ago. Ruth moved toward the door. Maybe instead of asking who did it, you should be asking why you didn't. She left them sitting in silence. 3 days later, Eleanor woke to the sound of hammers. She walked to the window and looked out. People were working in her yard. She recognized some of them. The blacksmith, the carpenter, the man who ran the general store. Others she had seen in town but never spoken to. They were clearing the ruins of the barn, sorting through the debris, setting aside what could be salvaged. Eleanor dressed quickly and went outside. Sheriff Garrett was there directing the work. He saw her and walked over. "Morning," he said. "What is this?" Eleanor asked. "Community." Garrett gestured at the workers. "Ruth spread the word that you could use help rebuilding. People volunteered. I didn't ask for help." "No, but they're offering it anyway." Eleanor watched the workers. The carpenter was measuring out a foundation. The blacksmith was sorting through bent nails, straightening the ones that could be reused. A woman Eleanor didn't know approached carrying a basket. "Mrs. Cross, I brought some food. Thought you and the workers might be hungry." Eleanor stared at her. "I don't know you." "I'm Sarah Brennan. My husband and I have a farm north of here." The woman set the basket down. "Pike's gang came to our place last year, took half our livestock, threatened to burn us out if we reported it. I'm sorry." "Don't be. We're just grateful someone finally stopped them." Sarah smiled. "This is the least we can do to say thank you." She walked away before Eleanor could respond. More people arrived throughout the morning. Some brought tools, others brought materials. A few just came to work. They didn't ask questions, didn't pry. They just worked. Eleanor stood on the porch watching, not sure what to do, not sure what to feel. Ruth arrived just before noon carrying a pitcher of cold water. "Quite a turnout," she said, climbing the porch steps. "I didn't ask for this." "I know, but they needed to do it anyway." Ruth poured water into a cup and handed it to Eleanor. "The town feels guilty for not helping sooner, for being afraid. This is how they make it right." Eleanor drank. The water was cold and sweet. "I don't need their guilt." "Maybe not, but they need to give it to you." Ruth sat down on the step. "Let them help, Eleanor. Let them be part of rebuilding what was lost." "Why? What difference does it make?" "Because community isn't just about living near each other. It's about helping when help is needed, showing up when it matters." Ruth looked at the workers. These people are learning something important, that they're stronger together than apart. Don't take that away from them. Eleanor said nothing. She watched the carpenter measuring out the frame for a new barn, watched the blacksmith forging new hinges, watched Sarah Brennan handing out sandwiches to the workers. "I'm not who they think I am," Eleanor said quietly. "Yes, you are. You're exactly who they think you are." Ruth stood. "You're someone who stood up when no one else would, someone who protected the valley when the law couldn't. That's what they see. That's what they respect." "But I killed 5 men." "Yes, you did." Ruth met her eyes. "And you'll carry that weight for the rest of your life. But don't let it make you forget what you saved. How many people are safer now because of what you did?" Eleanor looked down at her hands, at the calluses, the scars, the evidence of violence she could never erase. "Thomas wouldn't have wanted this," she said. "Thomas wanted you to be happy, to be at peace." Ruth's voice softened. "But he also knew who you were. He loved you anyway, not in spite of it, because of it." Eleanor felt tears pricking at her eyes. She blinked them away. "Come on," Ruth said. "Let's help them work. These hands of yours are good for more than pulling triggers." Eleanor hesitated. Then she nodded. Together they joined the others. The barn took 5 days to rebuild. It was not as large as the original, but it was solid, well made, the kind of structure that would stand for decades. On the final day, as the last beam was raised into place, someone started singing. It was an old song, a hymn Eleanor remembered from her childhood. Others joined in, their voices blending together in the afternoon air. Eleanor stood apart, watching, listening. She did not sing. She had never been good at singing. But she felt something stir in her chest, something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. When the work was finished, the carpenter walked over to her. "It's done, Mrs. Cross. Should hold for years if you take care of it." "Thank you." "No thanks needed. It was the right thing to do." He paused. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor tensed. "What? Was it really you in the canyon?" Eleanor looked at him, at his honest face, his calloused hands, the evidence of a life spent building instead of destroying. "Does it matter?" she asked. The carpenter thought about that. Then he smiled. "No, I suppose it doesn't." He tipped his hat and walked away. One by one the others left, until only Ruth remained. "How do you feel?" Ruth asked. Eleanor looked at the new barn, at the clean wood, the straight lines, the promise of shelter and safety. "Different," she said. "Good different, or bad different?" "I don't know yet." Ruth nodded. "That's fair." She started toward her horse, then stopped. "Oh, I almost forgot. There's someone who wants to meet you." "Who?" "You'll see." Ruth walked to the gate and called out. A young girl emerged from behind the wagon, maybe 8 years old, dark braids, too large dress. Eleanor's breath caught. The girl was Sarah's age, the same age her daughter had been when the creek took her. "This is Mary Webb," Ruth said. "Her parents were killed by outlaws 2 years ago. She lives with her aunt in town." Mary walked forward slowly. Her eyes were wide, nervous. "Hello, Mrs. Cross," she said quietly. "Hello, Mary. Miss Ruth said you might... that maybe..." Mary's voice trailed off. "What is it, child?" Eleanor asked. Mary looked up. Her eyes were bright with determination. "I want to learn. To protect myself. So what happened to my parents never happens to me." Eleanor felt her heart clench. "Learn what?" "To shoot. To track. To be strong like you." Eleanor looked at Ruth. Ruth's expression was neutral, giving nothing away. "I'm not a teacher," Eleanor said. "Miss Ruth said you were the best, that you could do things no one else could do." Mary's voice grew stronger. "I don't want to be afraid anymore. I want to be able to stand up, to fight back, like you did." Eleanor knelt down so she was eye level with the girl. "What I did, what I know how to do, it's not something to aspire to." "Why not?" "Because it involves killing, and killing changes you. It takes pieces of your soul and doesn't give them back." Mary was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My mama used to say that strength isn't about violence, it's about knowing when to use it and when not to." Eleanor felt tears threatening again. "Your mama was a wise woman. Will you teach me?" Eleanor looked at this child, this girl who had lost everything and was still brave enough to ask for help, to want to be stronger. She saw Sarah in Mary's face, the daughter she had lost, the son who never drew breath. She saw the future, the possibility of something other than loneliness. "I'll think about it," Eleanor said. Mary's face fell slightly, but she nodded. "Okay." Ruth helped Mary into the wagon. As they prepared to leave, Mary looked back. "Mrs. Cross, thank you for making the valley safe again." Eleanor watched them go, stood in the yard as the dust settled, as the sun began its descent toward the western hills. She walked to the new barn, stepped inside. The smell of fresh wood was sharp and clean. She ran her hand along one of the support beams, felt the smooth surface, the care that had gone into every cut, every joint. Thomas would have been proud of this barn, even if he would have been disappointed by how it came to be necessary. Eleanor closed her eyes, spoke to the empty air. I broke my promise, Thomas. I killed 5 men. I became the person you were afraid I'd become. She waited as if expecting an answer. None came. But in the silence she heard something else. A memory. Thomas's voice. Not from the deathbed. From earlier. When things were good. You're not defined by your worst moments, Eleanor. You're defined by what you do after them. Eleanor opened her eyes. She left the barn and walked to the house, to the kitchen, to the table where the rifle still lay disassembled and clean. She looked at it for a long time. Then she began to put it back together. 2 days later, Mary Webb returned. She came alone this time, walking up the road with a determination that reminded Eleanor of herself at that age. Eleanor was on the porch mending a harness. Mrs. Cross. Eleanor looked up. Mary. I came back to see if you'd thought about it. Eleanor set down the harness. I have. And, come here. Mary climbed the porch steps, stood in front of Eleanor, waiting. Eleanor studied her face, saw the hope there, the fear underneath, the need to be more than a victim. I'll teach you, Eleanor said, but on one condition. Anything. The first thing you learn is when not to use what I teach you, when to walk away, when to show mercy. Eleanor's voice was firm. What I know can make you strong, but it can also make you hard, cruel. You have to promise me you won't let it change who you are at your core. Mary nodded solemnly. I promise. Good. Eleanor stood. Then we start now. Follow me. She led Mary to the open ground beyond the barn, set up a target, a piece of wood with a circle marked in charcoal. First lesson, Eleanor said, breathing. Everything starts with breath. Control it, and you control the shot. Mary listened intently. Eleanor taught her the basics. Stance, grip, sight alignment, the way to breathe so your body stays still. They worked until the sun began to set. Mary's arms trembled from holding the position, but she did not complain. Finally, Eleanor said, That's enough for today. Mary lowered the rifle. When can I shoot it? When you're ready, not before. How will I know when I'm ready? Eleanor smiled faintly. You'll know. Mary handed back the rifle. Thank you, Mrs. Cross. Eleanor. You can call me Eleanor. Mary's face brightened. Thank you, Eleanor. She ran off down the road, her braids flying behind her. Eleanor watched her go, felt something warm in her chest, something she had not felt in 3 years. Purpose. The seasons turned. Spring became summer. Summer faded to fall. The valley healed, slowly, the way all wounded things heal, with time and care and the stubborn refusal to give up. Mary came 3 times a week. Eleanor taught her everything she knew, not just about shooting, about tracking, about reading the land, about survival. But more importantly, she taught her about restraint, about mercy, about the weight of decisions that could not be taken back. Mary learned quickly. She had a natural talent, a steady hand, and a patient eye. But she also had something Eleanor had lacked at that age: compassion, the ability to see enemies as people, to understand that violence was sometimes necessary but never something to celebrate. One afternoon, after Mary had successfully hit a target at 200 yards, Eleanor gave her a gift, a small rifle, not a buffalo gun, something lighter, more practical. This was my first rifle, Eleanor said. I was about your age when my father gave it to me. I want you to have it. Mary's eyes went wide. Are you sure? Yes, but it comes with a responsibility. You only use this to protect yourself or others, never to take what isn't yours, never to hurt someone who doesn't deserve it. Understand? I understand. Good. Eleanor squeezed her shoulder. You're going to be better than I was. I can already see it. Mary hugged her, fierce and sudden. Eleanor stiffened at first, then slowly, carefully she hugged back. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in late October, blanketing the valley in white. Eleanor stood on her porch watching it fall. The flakes were large and soft, disappearing as they touched the ground. Behind her the house was warm. A fire crackled in the hearth. Soup simmered on the stove. Mary was inside doing her schoolwork at the kitchen table. She had started spending more time at the ranch. Her aunt was happy to have the help with her younger children, and Eleanor, though she would not say it aloud, was glad for the company. She heard footsteps behind her, turned to see Mary standing in the doorway wrapped in a quilt. "It's beautiful," Mary said, looking at the snow. "It is." "Eleanor, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret it? What you did?" Eleanor knew what she meant. The canyon, the 5 men, the choice that had brought her back from hiding. "Every day," Eleanor said quietly. "But you'd do it again." Eleanor thought about that, about Pike, about the barn burning, about the animals screaming, about the choice between peace and justice. "Yes," she said finally. "I would." "Why?" "Because some things are worth fighting for, worth breaking promises for, worth carrying the weight for." Eleanor looked at Mary. "Your safety, the valley's safety, the ability for good people to live without fear. Those things matter more than my peace of mind." Mary was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think you're brave." Eleanor shook her head. "I'm not brave. I'm just practical. There was a problem. I had the skills to solve it. So I did. That's what makes you brave, doing what needs to be done, even when it costs you something." Eleanor felt her throat tighten. She turned back to the snow. "You should get inside before you catch cold." Mary went back in. Eleanor stayed on the porch a while longer. The snow fell heavier now, covering the ground, covering the ash that still lingered near the barn, covering the tracks, the evidence, the scars. By morning everything would be white, clean, new. But Eleanor knew better. Beneath the snow the ash remained. The memory remained. The weight remained. Snow could hide many things, but it could not erase them. Eleanor went inside, closed the door, locked it. In the kitchen Mary was reading aloud from a book, her voice clear and strong. Eleanor sat down beside her, listened, let the warmth of the fire and the sound of the girl's voice wash over her. For the first time in 3 years the house did not feel empty. It felt like home. On a cold morning in December, Eleanor walked to the canyon. She had not been back since the day of the shooting, had not wanted to see the place again, but something drew her there now. Some need to face what she had done. The snow was deep. Her boots left clear prints as she walked. When she reached the canyon entrance, she stopped. The bodies were gone. The sheriff had removed them weeks ago, buried them in unmarked graves on the edge of town. But the canyon remembered. Eleanor could see where each man had fallen, could trace the path of her bullets, could feel the echoes of gunfire that still seemed to hang in the air. She climbed the eastern slope to the ledge where she had waited, sat down in the same spot, looked out across the pass. From here she could see everything, the distance, the angles, the impossibility of what she had done. No one should have been able to make those shots. But she had, because she was Eleanor Cross, and that was what Eleanor Cross did. She pulled something from her coat pocket, a small wooden cross, carved by hand, simple but well made. She had made it herself, working late at night when Mary was asleep, when the house was quiet and she could think. Eleanor set the cross in a crack in the rock, wedged it tight so the wind would not take it. It was not for the men she had killed. They did not deserve markers. It was for herself, for the woman she had been before the canyon, before the choice, before the weight. That woman was dead now, as dead as Thomas, as dead as Sarah. This cross marked her grave. Eleanor stood, looked at it one more time. Then she turned and walked away. She did not look back. Spring returned to the valley. The snow melted. The creek ran high and fast. Green pushed through the earth, stubborn and insistent. Life continued, as it always did. Eleanor's ranch thrived. The new barn stood solid and strong. She had acquired new animals, a few horses, some chickens, a milk cow. Mary came every day now, learning, growing, becoming more confident, more capable. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, Mary said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About the future, about what I want to do with what you've taught me." Eleanor looked up from the tomato plants. "And I don't want to be a hunter or a soldier. I don't want to use what I know to hurt people." "Then what do you want?" Mary smiled. "I want to teach other girls, girls who are afraid, who feel helpless. I want to show them they can be strong, can protect themselves, can stand up." Eleanor felt pride swell in her chest. "That's a good purpose." "Will you help me?" "Always." Mary hugged her. Eleanor hugged back. No hesitation this time. When they pulled apart, Mary asked, "Do you think things will ever go back to how they were? Before Pike? Before the canyon?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, things don't go back. They only move forward." "Is that bad?" "No, it's honest." Eleanor stood brushing dirt from her hands. "We can't undo what happened, can't erase the past, but we can choose what we build in its place." She looked around the ranch, at the barn, at the garden, at the home she had rebuilt from ash and grief. "And I think we're building something good," she said. Mary nodded. "I think so too." On a warm evening in late May, Eleanor stood at the edge of the creek. The water ran clear and gentle. Sunlight sparkled on its surface. She knelt beside the cottonwood tree, beside the small wooden cross that bore her daughter's name. "Hello, Sarah," she said quietly. The wind moved through the leaves, soft, whispering. "I have someone I want you to meet. Her name is Mary. She's about your age, smart, brave, kind." Eleanor touched the cross. "I think you would have liked her." She sat there for a while, listening to the water, feeling the sun on her face. "I broke the promise I made to your father," she said. "I killed again, became the person he was afraid I'd become." The wind shifted. The leaves rustled. "But I'm not sorry, because I protected something worth protecting, and I found something I didn't know I was looking for." She paused. "Purpose, connection, a reason to keep going." Eleanor stood, looked down at the grave. "I miss you every day, both of you. But I'm not frozen anymore. I'm not just surviving. I'm living." She turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. I buried the rifle," she said, "up in the canyon, under a cairn of stones. So it's there if the valley ever needs it again. But I hope it doesn't." She walked back to the house. Mary was waiting on the porch, a book in her lap. "Everything okay?" Mary asked. "Yes," Eleanor said. "Everything's okay." They sat together as the sun set, not talking, just being. The valley spread out before them, green and alive and safe, for now. And now was enough. The legend of what happened in the canyon spread slowly. Travelers carried the story from town to town, each telling added details, embellishments, impossibilities. Some said it was a ghost who killed Pike's gang, the spirit of a murdered woman seeking vengeance. Others claimed it was an army sharpshooter who happened to be passing through. A few insisted it was divine intervention, the hand of God striking down the wicked. But in the valley people knew better. They did not speak her name, did not point her out to strangers, did not confirm or deny the rumors. But they knew, and when they passed Eleanor Cross on the street, they nodded, respectfully, gratefully. She nodded back. Nothing more. That was enough. Years later, when Eleanor was old and gray, when Mary had grown and had children of her own, someone asked her about that day, about the canyon, about Pike, about the legend. Eleanor sat in her rocking chair on the porch, a quilt across her lap, the same porch where she had once stood alone, watching her world burn. "Was it you?" the person asked. "In the canyon that day?" Eleanor looked out across the valley, at the green hills, at the creek running silver in the distance, at the barn that had been built twice, Once by Thomas with love, once by a community with gratitude. Does it matter? She asked. I suppose not. But people want to know. Eleanor smiled faintly. Then let them wonder. Some stories are better left unfinished. Some truths are better left unspoken. The person waited, hoping for more, but Eleanor said nothing else. She just rocked slowly, her eyes on the horizon, her hands folded in her lap. Hands that had built and destroyed and built again. Hands that carried the weight of 5 lives taken and 1 life saved. Her own. The sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and gold. The wind moved through the grass, soft, constant, remembering. And in the distance, if you listened closely, you could hear it, the whisper of a legend that refused to die.